Hannelore and Rudolf Schulhoff met in Vienna in the late 30s and were married in 1940 in Brussels, and were both able to be amongst the last to leave Europe before World War II and the rise of Nazism. They moved to New York and settled in Kings Point eventually, where we're sitting today. Mrs. Schulhoff's father had been in the reproduction and greeting card business, and they brought the business to New York and continued its legacy and business here. They really began collecting in the 50s, and one of the great influences was Justin Tannhauser at the Guggenheim, who encouraged them to really look at the art of their time. And what was really interesting is that the Schulhoff's business took them to Europe. So they were, for young collectors, collecting not only contemporary American for the time, but also looking really deeply into what the European movements were at that time, which very few people in their generation were doing. One of the great aspects of this collection is you really feel its personal nature. There's a partnership in the collecting. They both collected, had a great appetite for art and enjoyed meeting the artists as well and becoming friends over the years. Here you have two people really collecting with their own eye. I mean, they really had a great sense of quality for everything, paintings, drawings, and sculpture. And there's a beautiful sort of line that runs through this. There seems to be an ability to discern shape, color, and form. Again, quality. And this balance of, let's say, an artist like Alberto Burri all the way to an artist like Agnes Martin or Susan Rothenberg or Ellsworth Kelly or Richard Serra is just evident. There's a beautiful calm and a real energy. That's what's really, really, really special about this collection. Beginning in the late 50s, because of their many trips to Italy, they began collecting artists from the Scuola Romana, as it was called. So that was Afro Balsadella, known as Afro, Alberto Burri, Giorgio Santamasso, and those were very important relationships to them. And in fact, Afro came here often to Kings Point. He was very friendly with the Schulhoffs. And there's amazing correspondence with these artists. And as we were going through the archives to see the kind of tenderness and friendship that existed between the artists and the Schulhoffs is something that is quite rare.
I wanted to tell you both how happy I was to be with you, how much I appreciated and enjoyed your natural and affectionate friendship, and how much I thank you for your cordial hospitality. Afro.
This is a painting by Afro Balsadella. The title of the painting, which I really love, is called Porta Portese, which is painted in 1964, which is the reference to the famous flea market in Rome at the Porta Portese, which is an entrance to Rome that was built in the mid-1600s. Afro was really known for his ability to use color, shadow, and line to create a sense of space and action. And you really feel the sort of excitement of the flea market on a Saturday morning, people coming in and coming out, and the way you feel this almost sort of human aspect in the composition. Guggenheim actually bought their first Afro in 1957, and in 1961, the Guggenheim curator James Johnson Sweeney wrote a monograph on Afro, and he talked at length about this ability to bring color, shape, and shadow and line to this almost sort of a human sense of action and place. Schulhoffs acquired this picture around 1964, at the time it was painted, so they're obviously very much aware of the activities of the Guggenheim, and they became friends and very friendly with this artist who really was one of the most important in their collection. Following their pursuit of the post-war European abstract artists, it was a natural transition to discover an artist such as Agnes Martin, who was really one of Mrs. Schulhoff's personal favorites. She met the artist at the Elkon Gallery, who was representing Agnes Martin early on in her career. Upon that meeting, there was a bond. Mrs. Schulhoff had been collecting her work in depth prior to that meeting, but it really formed a friendship. And Agnes Martin wasn't someone who actually had deep friendships, but there was a relationship that was quite rare.
When I think of art, I think of beauty. Beauty is the mystery of life. It is not in the eye, it is in the mind. In our minds, there is an awareness of perfection. Agnes Martin.
This is Agnes Martin's Untitled 1974, one of the earlier works from the Schulhof Collection. Mrs. Schulhoff was deeply captivated by the spiritual nature of Agnes Martin's work. Her love of nature and the way she would really try to bring all of these elements into an abstract but deeply beautiful canvas. We have not seen a work from this period at auction in quite a while, and it really follows a period where her works are very monochromatic, very, very minimal from the mid-60s and late 60s. And an early example of where the color and the expanded grid is brought to a different level with the pencil lines and the beautiful washing of this subtle color. This is really just a magisterial, fantastic work from this period. A very subtle line down the center, which is actually sort of unusual, which we saw emerging later in her work. But along with this careful sort of hand-drawn bands of color filled in with these subtle terracottas and sky blue. It just shimmers with its sort of balance of nature and abstraction. Mukahara is from 1974, is one of Susan Rothenberg's rather iconic horse paintings, which emerged about that time when a generation of artists were really beginning to rethink, reconsider minimal conceptual abstraction and figuration. The horse really emerged as an image from a doodle. She was working with the idea of a divided line and a form that would neatly fall in half. So it became this quiet subject for her. The Schulhoffs had a wonderful embrace of international art. Two of the most important artists to emerge, one from France, one from Italy, were Yves Klein and Lucio Fontana. And here we have the classic gem-like IKB blue, the wonderful pigments, a small canvas, which is neatly kept in a box for all these years, is a wonderful example of a larger series, but certainly gives you a feeling for the Schulhoff's sense of understanding and exploration of new art. The Fontanas, the singular white slash on a small canvas, is as elegant and defining as it can be for an artist like Fontana, who's known for his multiple slashes, large scale, but this white with the single work is something I think is quite defining and shows the rigor of their eye. One of the most powerful friendships that emerged over their collecting lifetime was their friendship and relationship with Richard Serra. The Schulhoffs had reached out to Richard in around 1983 with the idea of actually having a sculpture built on the grounds at Kings Point. The Schulhoffs had made a significant commitment to outdoor sculpture and really were some of the first to create the idea of sculpture in your environment. With the Schulhoffs, he chose a very beautiful, quiet sort of corner in the grounds of the house. And he created what we are offering, which is titled Schulhoff's Curve. It's a fantastic work. While its scale is generous, it still has an intimacy that one doesn't necessarily feel with some of his more monumental works. The Schulhoff's Curve certainly anticipates the arc form that has become so prominent in many of Richard's works. What's so interesting about this work, it was completed in 1984, and 1 year later, Richard Serra found himself embroiled with the tilted arc controversy. In 1985, Hannelore Schulhoff was one of 122 people who went to testify on behalf of Richard and the tilted arc. And unfortunately, those who supported the work did not prevail, but it was extremely meaningful to Richard. Not only do they have an extraordinary eye and a great sense of relationships with the artists and dealers and the art of their time, but they also were extremely philanthropic. And they've made major commitments and gifts to many institutions over the years. The Schulhoffs met Peggy Guggenheim in the late 50s at a Venice Biennale and were guests at her home, and a bond formed immediately, and particularly with Mrs. Schulhoff and Peggy Guggenheim. And this relationship was something that became really important to the Schulhoffs.
I knew them both quite well. Rudolf even spent a time as trustee of the Solomon Guggenheim Foundation. So you might say that for a period of more than 30 years, between one and the other, they were supporters of the Peggy Guggenheim Collection and of the Solomon Guggenheim Foundation. So there's a kind of serenity, an emphasis on beauty and calm, which characterizes their collection. The Hannelore B. and Rudolf B. Schulhof Collection, as it will be known, will be installed in part in our garden pavilion, known quaintly here as the Barchessa, and in part, the outdoor sculpture will have a garden of its own here in Peggy's park.
The Schulhoffs really felt that the Peggy Guggenheim was such a fantastic jewel in a beautiful city that this would be a fitting place to really make a major gift, which will be unveiled in June of 2013 at the Venice Biennale. Over the years, the Schulhoffs were extremely generous about opening their home to anyone who wanted to see the collection. It was this very special place. And the art itself created an environment that was very unique in an American collection, with its balance of European, American artists, fantastic furniture, sculpture on the grounds. Those who visited walked away and had an indelible impression of this very, very jewel-like and rather personal collection that really was unique amongst many in the post-war era.